1932, a penniless coal miner in West Virginia cured his crippled, arthritic hands using just leftover bacon grease and hot cayenne pepper. That exact primitive heating salve is number 30 on our comprehensive list of forgotten survival remedies today. These 30 forgotten healing salves were desperately designed for pure survival by incredibly resilient people stretching tiny paychecks across long, brutal winters. When you live entirely alone and your aging body aches, the mere thought of navigating a massive, expensive, modern pharmacy feels completely overwhelming. Our tough grandmothers fed and healed their families using simple animal fats and humble backyard herbs sitting right in their kitchens. Hit that subscribe button right now to actively support our channel and preserve this critically lost medical history. Let us slowly count down the 30 forgotten poor man healing salves from the Great Depression that modern America completely forgot.
Number 30 is the legendary deep joint heating rub, utilizing leftover bacon grease and fiery cayenne pepper powder. When a harsh winter chill caused severe crippling arthritis, a senior did not buy expensive chemical pain creams from a distant town store. They simply mixed a heavy spoonful of hot, saved bacon fat with a massive pinch of spicy red pepper powder. The thick animal fat heavily penetrated the aging skin, while the pepper aggressively stimulated warm, healing blood flow deep into the dying joint. It smelled like a rustic country kitchen, but it instantly quieted the screaming joints and allowed a lonely person to finally sleep. This simple mixture sat in an old tin can on the nightstand of nearly every Depression-era home, saving people from endless, agonizing pain. It completely eliminated the brutal, aching stiffness that tore weak, aging hands and knees apart during the freezing winter months. A jar of grease and a single cheap spice cost practically nothing, but delivered absolute nighttime peace to a suffering human soul. Number 29 is the ultimate respiratory chest rub made from pure, rendered pork lard and crushed fresh green pine needles. Buying expensive, modern menthol rubs is an absolute luxury that many aging people living on fixed incomes simply cannot safely afford. A painful, tight chest cold could easily turn into a dangerous, deadly pneumonia infection that ruined a frail respiratory system. Grandmothers knew that melting cheap lard and steeping it with highly aromatic pine needles would pull the painful chest congestion right out. The natural heavy oils in the pine needles physically act exactly like expensive modern eucalyptus, clearing the blocked nasal passages completely. A senior sitting alone could rub this cheap mixture over their ribs and save their lungs without spending gas money to visit a clinic. The rapid reduction in heavy lung pressure brought tears of pure, absolute relief to tired, suffering, vulnerable, elderly eyes. It required 0 prescriptions and used tree branches that already sat freely growing right next to the humble wooden farmhouse porch. Number 28 is the Supreme Wound Healing Balm, utilizing hard beef tallow and bright yellow wild calendula flowers. Deep farm cuts and terrible skin abrasions severely limit mobility, making basic daily chores feel like climbing a massive, steep, dangerous mountain. Wise, resilient seniors simply mixed rendered hot beef fat with crushed, dried calendula petals to create a highly protective, thick skin barrier. Smearing this bright yellow, earthy ointment onto an open wound helped balance the tissue and aggressively flushed out heavy, dangerous bacterial infection. It required no complicated chemical preparation and 0 expensive trips to a distant, busy, emergency urgent care medical office. This cheap natural bandage gave disabled widows the vital strength they needed to maintain their own independent properties without fearing deadly gangrene. The stiff, swollen cuts would slowly heal beautifully, allowing them to finally wash dishes without experiencing extreme, agonizing, burning physical pain. The beef tallow cost absolutely nothing at the local neighborhood butcher and lasted for many long, healthy, protected skin months. Number 27 is the Deep Burn Salvation Ointment,
crafted from rendered chicken fat and thick, pure, raw honey. Terrible cooking burns plague the elderly, mind bringing dark, quiet hours of severe, agonizing pain and deep, massive physical exhaustion. Before the invention of expensive chemical burn sprays, grandmothers gently heated leftover chicken grease on the heavy, dark iron kitchen stove. They melted a small spoonful of raw honey into the fat to create a deeply comforting antibacterial, sterile, thick skin coating. The heavy fat and natural enzymes in the honey coated the exposed raw nerves while sealing out dangerous airborne aggressive household bacteria. A senior, spreading this rich, shiny liquid over a fresh burn, would feel their tense, screaming muscles completely naturally, deeply relax. The anxiety of being entirely alone with a serious, festering wound simply melted away under the heavy, healing, golden slick animal fat. It was a rustic, liquid bandage that required no doctor visit to legally and safely obtain during the hardest, darkest economic times. Number 26 is the deep muscle heating paste, made of cheap plain petroleum jelly and dry yellow mustard powder. Aging muscles become terribly thin and lose crucial elasticity, resulting in painful, invisible cramps that aggressively burn and painfully throb constantly. Expensive, medicated pharmacy sports lotions often sit strictly on the surface and violently irritate the fragile, aging human skin even more. Mixing ground mustard seed with heavy petroleum jelly creates a thick, sticky paste that acts as a natural, glorious, deep heating pad. Applying this cool mixture to tight-locked calves forces heavy circulation and natural relaxing properties deep into the wounded, aching muscle tissue. A widow with severe back pain could easily mix this in a small glass bowl and find absolute relief from the endless, maddening leg cramps. The thick jelly leaves a smooth, protective barrier that holds the mustard heat long after the original deep pain is successfully banished. It restores a quiet physical dignity to someone who is terribly embarrassed by their violently spasming, highly unpredictable, fragile, aging body. Number 25 is the heavy infection-drawing salve, heavily utilizing leftover bacon grease and freshly crushed raw garlic. The smell alone brings back intense, vivid memories of Depression-era kitchens where dangerous sickness was simply absolutely never allowed. A senior feeling the heavy pressure of a deep skin boil would finely chop pungent garlic right into a soft spoon of bacon fat. Letting it sit on the skin overnight pulled the powerful medicinal sulfur out of the harsh garlic and killed the massive infection completely. Spreading a thick layer of this pungent ointment acted as a natural aggressive antibiotic that physically ruined heavy, tough bacterial cell walls. It smelled absolutely terrible, but it kept vulnerable, lonely seniors walking freely through the harsh, bitter, muddy, cold spring months. The sticky grease forcefully ripped the deadly fluid right out of the aging, weak, highly vulnerable, dangerously infected human skin tissue. Mothers made this rough remedy in large, heavy tin cans because it kept the entire fragile, vulnerable family miraculously alive. Number 24 is the heavy respiratory rubbing wax consisting of cheap vegetable shortening and solid white camphor blocks. After a lifetime of hard physical labor in dusty factories, the human respiratory system demands a massive and highly painful toll. A retired mechanic whose lungs are heavily, permanently scarred intimately knows this. Deep, terrifying nighttime inability to catch a clean breath. Rubbing a melted mixture of shortening and camphor directly onto the chest delivers pure opening vapors straight into the restricted breathing passages. The warm shortening forces tight, contracted chest muscles to finally let go, while the camphor opens the completely restricted lower lung airways. This tiny daily breathing therapy session costs just pennies and happens quietly in bed without any expensive, intimidating outside medical help. The deep lung ache slowly drains directly into the peaceful, quiet night, leaving the breathing remarkably smooth and wonderfully functional. It is an act of pure physical salvation, bought in a cheap cardboard grocery box, originally meant strictly for baking pie crusts.
Number 23 is the mysterious black drawing salve, made from pure beef tallow and crushed wood stove charcoal. Getting older often brings mysterious deep splinters and an unpredictable immune system that suddenly rejects foreign objects with massive, highly painful swelling. Buying actual sterile medical drawing paste meant navigating a massive store aisle filled with confusing, highly toxic, expensive modern chemical labels. Smashing cold fire pit charcoal into heavy beef fat creates a deeply soothing, thick black ointment that absorbs absolute, pure, dangerous poison. The active charcoal instantly binds to the hidden bacterial toxins, while the heavy fat softens the tight surrounding violently angry red skin. It asks absolutely nothing of you, except to spread it slowly and wait for the terrible twisting pressure to completely fade totally away. A lonely senior does not have to worry about dangerous surgical cuts causing them to bleed and potentially, tragically, lose a healthy limb. This primitive black paste brings the twisting, rolling, deep infection to a fast, absolute dead halt by physically sucking it totally out. Number 22 is the respiratory fever plaster, utilizing pure pork lard and heavily chopped raw, pungent white onion pieces. Before electric heating pads, grandmothers relied on the intense chemical heat generated by a simple, raw, harsh, weeping onion poultice. For a severe burning chest cold, they mixed the stinging wet onion with just enough lard to make a thick, heavy, sticky paste. Spreading this messy paste between two thin cotton cloths and laying it on the chest pulled the painful internal fever completely away. The intense sulfur from the raw onion stimulates massive blood circulation directly to the struggling, desperately weak, aging lungs beneath the ribs. You had to watch the skin carefully to prevent mild irritation, but this powerful, rustic remedy saved countless, lonely lives during harsh winters. The violent, hacking coughing fits would miraculously stop as the heavy, hot vapor deeply penetrated the frozen, tightly restricted chest cavity. It was aggressive, brutal medicine that worked exactly when absolutely nothing else could possibly logically save a desperately sick, dying person. Number 21 is the gentle circulation rub made of pure churned butter and heavily ground sharp, coarse black pepper. A sudden freezing sensation in the distant, fragile toes during the middle of a dark winter night is a truly terrifying, lonely experience. Without 24-hour clinics, desperate mothers and lonely seniors had to rely on whatever was sitting quietly waiting in the kitchen pantry. Gently warming a spoonful of butter with a massive pinch of black pepper created a highly effective natural topical heating liquid. Rubbing this warm, infused fat directly into the painful, icy feet brought almost immediate and profound, totally warming physical relief. It smelled like a rustic old farmhouse kitchen, but it aggressively fought the deep inner chill and allowed the freezing sufferer to gently sleep. The warm butter gently softened the hardened, cracked heel skin, while the sharp pepper juice forced the completely collapsed cold veins open. It completely saved poor, vulnerable, rural people from experiencing permanent, terrible frostbite and the agonizing physical tragedy of losing amputated limbs. Here is where things get intensely personal and painfully real for absolutely anyone watching this educational historical survival video right now. The simple, 2-ingredient fat remedies on this list are not just old wives' tales or random, silly, forgotten, primitive rural folklore. They are vital, brilliant survival strategies invented by desperate, starving people who had absolutely no one else to legally lean on for support. A senior living entirely alone today faces something that modern, bright medical pharmaceutical commercials almost never honestly and openly talk about. They face the quiet, terrible internal fear of getting dangerously sick in an empty, silent house with absolutely no immediate car keys.
When your back hurts so badly you cannot even slowly stand up, washing 5 different pots to make an herbal extract is completely impossible. A simple, fat-based cure is the necessary bridge between suffering silently in the dark and taking your vital, personal, physical power back. You could easily afford these simple, greasy ingredients when you were completely exhausted, and when the monthly meager pension check was totally gone. Number 20 is the famous deep lung poultice, aggressively made from pure rendered goose grease and strong medicinal pine turpentine. Deep, painful chest infections and severe, heavy bronchitis were common, deadly hazards for people working hard manual labor jobs entirely outside.
Without proper synthetic antibiotics to extract a lung infection, they relied on harsh solvents that naturally aggressively break down heavy, thick mucus. Mixing strong liquid turpentine with soft goose fat creates a powerful vapor vacuum that does not severely badly burn the delicate human skin. The wet, natural animal fats and sharp chemical compounds physically pull the deep, painful congestion up directly to the surface of the throat. By the next morning, the terrible, throbbing lung pain was gone, and the tight chest was finally ready to violently drain and properly heal. The goose grease acted as a perfectly smooth organic buffer that easily spread evenly over the entire swollen, completely ruined human rib cage. It was the ultimate poor man hospital treatment, performed completely safely, right in the humble, incredibly drafty wooden, cold farm bedroom. Number 19 is the venom-extracting ointment using pure pork lard and shredded, dried, harsh brown agricultural tobacco leaves. Chronic, painful insect stings heavily blanketed the elderly farmers, making the simplest daily garden tasks feel like completely impossible, highly deadly chores. Before expensive chemical sting sprays existed, a senior would mix a small, heavy pinch of strong chewing tobacco into a dollop of thick lard. Spreading this dark, sticky brown paste directly over a fresh bee sting completely transformed the bitter, painful, stinging, burning sensation instantly. The heavy nicotine toxins actively neutralized the acidic, raw bee venom, while the thick lard offered sustained cooling, absolute relief to the swollen skin. This cheap, midday rural ritual allowed an exhausted grandmother to find the vital strength to finally finish picking the massive, heavy tomato crop. It cooled the permanently red, angry, highly swollen bumps and forced the tired, groggy brain to snap back to bright, painless, total attention. The entire beautiful lifting organic remedy cost absolutely less than 5 total humble pennies and saved massive, agonizing, unnecessary rural physical suffering. Number 18 is the soothing splinter extracting paste, heavily combining leftover breakfast bacon grease and plain simple white baking soda. A solitary senior who struggles to see clearly often spends entirely too much agonizing time trying to violently dig out a tiny, invisible wooden splinter. This constant, aggressive physical picking causes heavy friction and trapped dirt that quickly turns into agonizing, invisible, throbbing, deep skin infections. Mixing simple baking soda with bacon fat forms a smooth paste that creates a perfect osmotic drawing physical barrier over the infected wound. Spreading this cool, white and brown gritty paste onto the fragile, swollen skin physically forces the deep wooden splinter to slide slowly, completely out. A single cheap cardboard box of baking soda has quietly saved millions of people from terrible, festering, expensive, deep surgical skin infections. The fat instantly softens the tough, calloused external skin, while the baking soda provides deep, immediate, continuous osmotic pulling, drawing relief. It gives an immobile person the total bodily freedom to remove a painful thorn without silently crying and wincing in agonizing continuous physical pain. Number 17 is the cracked hand salve, beautifully crafted from cheap kitchen olive oil and melted pure, natural yellow beeswax.
Harsh farming weather and constant heavy hand washing with strong chemical lye soap left hands bleeding deeply, completely cracked, and incredibly painful. Modern, expensive, heavily perfumed hand creams did not exist in rural Depression-era homes, where every single tiny, shiny penny was carefully, totally counted.
Grandmothers mixed cheap, heavy oil with melted honeycomb wax to scrub and perfectly seal their absolutely ruined, bleeding, tired working hands. The wax formed a permanent waterproof strong shield over the dead, dry skin, while the rich oil provided a massive, deep internal moisture barrier. Washing this simple salve completely off was impossible, which left the tough, working hands feeling surprisingly beautifully soft and deeply cared for. The deep, bloody, painful cracks physically sealed up, allowing the lonely senior to finally wash their own dirty dishes without crying in sharp pain. It turned basic, cheap agricultural hive waste into a luxurious, high-end medical skin treatment that easily survived absolute freezing, bitter winter temperatures. Number 16 is the severe joint-numbing cream containing pure pork lard and heavily crushed, cheap, highly effective white aspirin pills. The heavy mental weight of living alone often brings terrible creeping physical joint anxiety, right as the cold, weak sun finally goes down. Racing, dark, horrible thoughts about how to afford expensive modern arthritis medicine can keep a lonely senior pacing the hard wooden old floorboards. Gently mixing melted lard with a generous heavy pinch of crushed aspirin creates a powerful, mild, topical medical sedative pain cream. The trace chemical compounds in the aspirin absorb deeply through the animal fat to actively suppress frantic, anxious, completely firing nerve endings. Rubbing this smooth, fragrant fat directly into a swollen, tight knee while sitting in a quiet rocking chair brings profound, total physical peace. It stops the rapid, terrifying, deep throbbing pain that plagues so many elderly sick people living in absolute, total, scary physical isolation. The heavy, warm fat sits quietly on the skin, actively mimicking the beautiful, glorious feeling of being deeply and truly physically, safely protected. Number 15 is the severe rash healing paste, using pure beef fat and heavily pulverized fragile white chicken eggshells. Buying modern zinc oxide cream in the 1930s was a massive, impossible luxury that many poor, desperate farming families simply could not afford. When a terrifying red, angry rash spiked, they crushed dry eggshells into a fine, chalky powder and mixed them directly into hard beef tallow. Laying this thick, white, deeply gritty paste directly across a burning, weeping rash naturally drew the dangerous, raw moisture out of the fragile, broken skin. The natural, concentrated calcium aggressively rebuilt the broken, delicate skin barriers, while the thick beef fat held the soothing powder perfectly, absolutely in place. This remedy required absolutely 0 trips to a distant, busy town pharmacy, and reliably, totally cleared massive weeping skin sores by midnight. A sick, exhausted elderly person could easily gently rub this gritty fat over their own body and finally successfully drift into comfortable, profound, healing sleep. The ruined, angry skin was completely, miraculously restored in the morning, taking the terrible, unbearable, burning itch entirely away, completely with it. Number 14 is the homemade jaw-numbing balm, made strictly from rendered golden chicken fat and heavily crushed whole spicy cloves. Severe dental decay is incredibly highly deadly for vulnerable seniors because the aging jawbone simply stops fighting off deep, massive tooth infections. This leads to severe, dangerous, extremely painful referred jaw pain that can quickly end in a terrifying, unexpected, miserable, expensive trip to the hospital. Grandmothers created their own emergency numbing deep tissue rub by mixing pulverized cloves deeply into warm, golden rendered smooth chicken fat. This exact rustic mixture
perfectly mimics the natural strong numbing agents used by professional doctors and forces rapid, deep internal pain relief. It smells slightly, totally strange, but rubbing it heavily on the outside of the aching cheek can literally bring a screaming person complete peace. You do not need to buy brightly colored, expensive oral numbing gels filled with massive, confusing amounts of artificial, fake, dangerous numbing chemicals. The basic, wholly traditional combination of animal fat and strong cloves saves the human fragile mind from completely collapsing under the terrible, relentless tooth pain. Number 13 is the Chafe Healing Ointment, combining leftover breakfast bacon grease and fine, white, dry potato starch powder. A violent, brutal summer heat wave can leave a frail, fragile senior completely depleted and utterly terrified to walk due to massive, bloody thigh chafing. The famous poor man rubbing powders started in ancient, humble hot kitchens, where easily accessible starches were the only safe, available skin medicine. Scraping the fine, pure starch off a raw potato and mixing it with bacon fat provides natural, heavy lubrication which actively, physically stops brutal friction. Spreading this slick, greasy paste onto raw, bleeding inner thighs stopped terrible, burning rubbing and gently restored the entirely stalled mobility of an aging person. This bland, completely simple cream provided critical daily life-saving movement without causing any further painful, deep internal or external sensitive skin distress. It allowed a completely, totally exhausted, isolated widow to finally stand completely up and actively return to her desperately needed, vital, daily household jobs.
The potato starch also naturally heavily absorbed the awful, burning, salty sweat that originally heavily, violently attacked the delicate, vulnerable, thin, aging skin lining. Number 12 is the intense headache salve, utilizing pure rendered pork lard and crushed, dried backyard garden mint leaves. As the human aging body grows older, it slowly stops managing blood pressure effectively, leading to massive, crippling, daily, highly painful tension headaches. Seniors often sit in terrible, silent, deep discomfort after a long, hard day, feeling their skull violently, physically throbbing, and heavily, totally trapped. Steeping crushed green mint leaves in warm, completely melted lard completely relaxes the smooth, tight muscles surrounding the human skull and deep neck. It forces trapped, deeply painful tension to slowly, completely release, and stops the tired, aching scalp from violently, aggressively gripping itself in sheer agony. A small, simple mint plant growing on a kitchen windowsill is a continuous, incredibly cheap pharmacy for absolutely anyone with a sensitive, terrible, aching head. Rubbing the bright, intensely fragrant fat across the tight forehead clears the blocked nasal passages and gently, heavily massages the painful, tight cranial walls. It turns a miserable, agonizing, deeply painful evening back into a completely quiet, pleasant, beautifully, incredibly restful, completely, deeply painless night. Number 11 is the Deep Sprain Healing Wrap, made from thick, white vegetable shortening and highly concentrated, pure Epsom salt crystals. Nothing was ever totally wasted in a true Depression-era household, especially the highly valuable, extremely expensive medical salt crystals strictly purchased for hot baths. A senior with a violently twisted, heavily swollen purple ankle from working in a harsh, uneven farm garden would mix salt directly into thick shortening. Rubbing this gritty, thick, heavy paste heavily over a purple, angry, sprained ankle created a highly luxurious, deep tissue effective medical treatment. The rough salt crystals aggressively pulled the dead, painful fluid out, while the thick, heavy fat pumped massive, soothing moisture back into the tight skin. It was a tiny, necessary, glorious moment of pure medical physical care that cost absolutely nothing extra to beautifully and easily, successfully create at home.
The natural heavy magnesium in the salt actively heavily stimulated healing blood flow to the tired, heavily aching, torn, stiff ligaments beneath the aging skin. Poor rural people deserved basic physical total dignity, and this wonderful thick salty scrub completely, naturally, beautifully provided it, without expensive, terrifying hospital bills. Here is the quiet, terrifying, hidden tragedy the massive, modern medical pharmaceutical industry desperately, heavily wants to completely, absolutely ignore forever.
These two-ingredient basic fat remedies cost almost absolutely nothing because they rely on simple discarded items that nobody can patent or legally own. There is absolutely no brand loyalty in a wet, cheap chunk of lard or a plain yellow cardboard box of plain baking soda. There is no massive million-dollar manipulative advertising budget behind a tiny hidden jar of bacon grease or a handful of wild green pine needles. The corporate global profit margin on a simple spoonful of chicken fat is just a tiny, microscopic, totally invisible fraction of a single penny. That is exactly, fundamentally, why you never see emotional, manipulative television commercials promoting warm, salted lard rubs or harsh, stinging onion chest plasters. The simple, natural solutions that quietly keep resilient, strong seniors alive and out of massive financial debt are the simple solutions nobody can easily exploit. Instead, they relentlessly, aggressively sell expensive synthetic chemical skin creams that contain less actual true healing power than a simple humble bowl of warm animal fat. Number 10 is the Nerve Calming Rub, blending hard white beef tallow and heavily ground spicy aromatic ginger root powder. When a thick, scratchy, intensely burning nerve pain signals the scary, quiet beginning of a long, terrible sciatic episode, completely fast action is absolutely required. Modern, bright red, shiny nerve pills taste like harsh, weird plastic and leave the aging human mind feeling completely numb and strangely, dangerously, uncomfortably dry. Stirring sharp yellow ginger powder into a bowl of warm tallow creates a violently, incredibly hostile environment for severe, chronic, deep nerve inflammation. Massaging this sour, beautifully spicy fat physically completely forces the harmful, aggressive swelling away from the raw, red, highly irritated deep spinal column nerves. A jar of cheap beef tallow costs a few tiny dollars and requires absolutely no complicated, confusing medical copay or long, terrible, depressing waiting room line. The heavy, highly concentrated ginger literally violently sucks the life-giving blood directly into the dying tissue, instantly, completely reviving the broken, totally frozen limbs. A senior can easily, beautifully do this 10 times a day without ever worrying about a dangerous, terrible, unseen chemical overdose completely ruining their tired liver. Number 9 is the Soothing Eczema Cream, consisting of pure, golden churned butter and heavily crushed dried yellow chamomile flowers. Aging, frail arms suffer terribly from thick, autoimmune skin peeling that hides deep under long winter sleeves, causing severe, continuous, daily, invisible psychological pain. Prescription chemical steroid creams are outrageously, massively expensive and often take many long, frustrating, horrible months to show any real, visible, permanent physical progress. Whipping soft, warm butter with completely pulverized chamomile creates an active, highly soothing golden skin cream that violently, strongly attacks the awful, painful, intense redness. The intense natural herbal reaction actively completely destroys the thick, protective, strong cell walls of the stubborn, ugly eczema hiding deep in the dermal layers. A solitary, incredibly strong senior can sit reading a pleasant book while this cheap, fatty mixture quietly, totally cures their painful, embarrassing, bleeding, raw arms. Over just a few incredibly short weeks, the horrible, red, dark discoloration completely fades, and the painful cracking, angry swelling completely, totally vanishes. Absolutely, forever. It buys completely back the basic, simple, vital freedom
to finally comfortably wear short sleeves without silently, constantly grimacing in deep, continuous emotional and physical pain.
Number 8 is the circulation-boosting scrub using pure rendered pork lard and heavily used harsh, bitter morning coffee grounds. Having cold, totally numb, deeply discolored hands is a daily, continuous, horrible misery for seniors living with weak, tired, badly failing, fragile, aging hearts. Waking up in a freezing, extremely drafty house makes the deep, aching, dark purple chill feel absolutely permanent and completely, totally, completely, entirely inescapable. Stirring a massive, thick handful of rough, dark coffee grounds into soft, warm lard forces the surface tiny blood vessels to violently, immediately open wide. Scrubbing this dark, deeply gritty fat sends a massive, glorious rush of warm, healing, fresh blood directly to the freezing, distant, extremely tired toes and fingers. It acts as a powerful, incredibly cheap external skin furnace for vulnerable people who live far, totally away from modern, heated, fancy, hospital physical therapy rooms. The thick lard heavily protects the delicate thin skin lining, while the fierce caffeine actively, rapidly, strongly expands the totally collapsed, dying, highly restricted, aging veins. It gracefully restores crucial, vital living warmth to a body that felt like it was slowly, permanently, completely turning to absolute freezing, solid, unmoving stone. Number 7 is the violent cramp-stopping rub made strictly of rendered soft goose fat and yellow, deeply aromatic dry mustard powder. When a senior has been violently, tightly gripped by a terrifying random calf cramp, the simple, logical thought of moving brings absolute, intense, blinding terror. Our resilient, tough grandmothers knew that mixing dry mustard deeply into smooth goose fat creates a thick, violently hot, deep, incredibly healing muscle rub. Massaging this yellow, sticky paste leaves a starchy, oily, warm liquid that completely coats and heavily, thoroughly protects the raw, screaming, heavily torn muscle fibers. Rubbing this spicy, thick fat forcefully, heavily, replaces crucial, completely lost circulation and provides incredibly gentle, highly accessible, topical, absolute deep heat healing energy. It is the absolute safest, totally logical first step back toward walking completely normally, and it costs absolutely less than 5 total completely shiny pennies to make. The thick goose fat acts like a soothing, warm liquid blanket, dropping gently, smoothly, over a violently angry, deeply burning, knotted, completely tight leg muscle. It allowed totally, completely exhausted Depression-era workers to finally proudly stand up and actively return to their desperately, completely needed, highly painful physical jobs. Number 6 is the famous deep drawing paste, utilizing leftover thick bacon grease and heavily ground, rough, incredibly yellow cornmeal. Chronic, deep, painful skin boils make the simple, elegant, absolute act of wearing tight-fitting daily clothing feel like pure, brutal, absolutely terrible, completely absolute torture. Indigenous tribal cultures and wise, tough grandmothers alike deeply knew the massive, wonderful healing power of a rough-drawing poultice made from basic kitchen staples. Mixing warm, saved bacon fat with a heavy, thick spoonful of cornmeal creates a massive, miracle paste that violently, deeply pulls out heavy, hidden, angry infections. The rough, tiny cornmeal actively, completely forces the human aging body to properly, naturally expel the powerful, dangerous, thick pus hidden deep inside the terribly swollen tissue. A senior successfully applying this warm, incredibly golden paste before bed will wake beautifully up with significantly less swelling and much greater, completely painless mobility. The warm, thick bacon fat physically heavily carries the rough drawing deep action deeply, completely into the painfully swollen, violently screaming internal body skin tissues.
It miraculously replaces handfuls of expensive, highly dangerous, kidney-destroying modern antibiotic pills with a single, beautiful, tasty, warm-smelling, gentle, incredibly smooth skin rub. Number 5 is the famous burn-restoring salve, heavily, strongly relying on hard white beef tallow and deeply, totally mashed, boiled orange raw carrots. This rustic, deeply orange remedy looks completely, totally bizarre to modern young eyes, but it works incredibly better than almost any expensive synthetic pharmacy chemical liquid. Smashing a bright, beautiful orange boiled carrot and heavily, deeply mixing it with hard, hot tallow creates a fascinating, beautiful, deeply, highly orange cream. Over several long, quiet hours, the heavy fat aggressively, strongly draws the powerful medicinal, deeply healing vitamin A completely out of the soft orange root vegetable. Applying a heavy spoonful of this bright, completely orange cream aggressively, powerfully rebuilds the completely, absolutely ruined skin trapped deep in aging, severe, horrible kitchen burns. Housewives historically penciled this exact, highly critical, life-saving recipe deeply into the worn, stained margins of their trusted, daily Depression-era massive farm cooking books. It smells surprisingly wonderfully sweet and totally, completely lacks the horrible, burning, awful bite of the modern, harsh, incredibly stinging alcohol-based synthetic burn sprays. This cheap, wonderful, magical salve successfully saved millions of fragile, extremely frail people from violently, continually suffering massive, permanent, ugly scarring on their delicate, aging hands.
Number 4 is the extreme fungal destroying scrub containing pure rendered pork lard and heavily, completely crushed black tough walnut shells. Severe, deep fungal foot decay is arguably, easily the most terrifying, sharp, agonizing pain for a vulnerable, weak senior living on a strict, fixed poverty income to experience. The horrifying, dark thought of a massive, highly expensive hospital podiatrist bill is enough to completely make a proud, mentally strong person completely, physically, completely break down. Crushing bitter, tough walnut hulls heavily into a tiny, small spoon of lard creates a massive, incredibly heavy, natural, antifungal, dark medical, absolutely destroying ointment. Rubbing this gritty, absolutely dark fat directly, aggressively, onto the exposed, screaming, completely ruined nail forces the powerful juglone chemical deeply, completely, into the dying fungal infection. It beautifully buys a terrified, trapped person crucial, vital time to actually, absolutely heal naturally, without suffering, in absolute, pure, blinding, highly expensive, agonizing medical debt. Spice racks, deeply placed in the 1950s, heavily featured glass jars of walnut hulls, precisely entirely for this exact, terrible, awful, totally dark physical occasion. It was emergency, brutal, fungal surgery, heavily successfully, distilled into a tiny, remarkably dark brown, highly oily, completely natural, deeply, wonderfully healing foot scrub. Number 3 is the Deep Wound Packing Gel, crafted from cheap, simple petroleum jelly and heavy, highly granulated white, completely sweet baking sugar. Severe, deep, heavily bleeding cuts can instantly, totally trap a fiercely mentally independent senior in their cold bed for several dark, totally lonely, miserable, highly dangerous bleeding days. Modern, sterile, expensive surgical glues are massively expensive and carry a terrifying deep risk of causing terrible, awful allergic reactions while a frail, sick person slowly heals. Mixing white, pure sugar deeply into thick, highly viscous petroleum jelly creates a thick, incredibly, totally hyperosmotic gel that stops all massive, deep bacterial growth completely dead. Packing this sweet, incredibly thick gel directly, aggressively into a deep, massive cut drives heavy healing pure sugar directly, completely into the violently, totally bleeding torn flesh. The wet, incredibly thick jelly heavily forces the violently, deeply reproducing bacteria to completely, totally dehydrate and gracefully, deeply, violently, incredibly aggressively die off very quickly. The thick, completely synthetic oil stops the aging skin from absolutely drying out, while perfectly safely transferring the massive, wonderful, totally deep, healing, raw, sweet energy sugar. A lonely senior could miraculously make this totally alone and find total, absolute salvation from the terrible, endless, totally gripping fear of a highly deadly, deep blood infection. Number 2 is the gentle ringworm-destroying paste, making highly brilliant absolute use of pure, churned sweet butter and heavy, completely coarse white table salt. While harsh synthetic chemicals absolutely work well for heavy, serious, modern infections, a dry, scratching, completely persistent fungal ring requires a much totally cheaper, older approach. A senior scratching violently, relentlessly alone into a quiet, totally empty room simply desperately needs their raw, broken skin to be smoothly, heavily, deeply, entirely, completely coated. Mixing a massive, heavy handful of harsh, coarse salt deeply into soft, warm, golden butter creates a delicate, highly, but violently, completely effective antifungal medical skin paste. The rich, entirely natural fats deeply hidden in the butter heavily, massively support the skin, while the thick, heavy salt acts as a brutal, violent, totally, completely fungal destroyer. This deeply, highly comforting, bright, perfectly yellow paste completely feels like a warm, deeply loving hug going directly, completely, onto a severely, violently, totally itching sore arm. It does not completely cause awful, terrible stomach cramps or terrible, deeply dizzy, sleepy, completely dangerous spells like the modern chemical pharmacy highly toxic antifungal swallowing pills. It was entirely the absolute, very finest, completely purest medicine a desperately, entirely poor, loving, caring grandmother could ever possibly beautifully, deeply create for her totally desperate family. Number 1 is the ultimate sciatic nerve pain relief rub, consisting of pure, rendered smooth goose grease and heavily, totally crushed, raw, highly pungent garlic cloves. Sciatica is a completely brutal, burning, agonizing nerve pain that aggressively, quickly shoots down the human leg and completely, entirely destroys a person's basic, vital physical mobility. Ancient, deeply wise grandmothers, entirely living in rural farming remote villages, aggressively, completely treated this mysterious, burning, agonizing pain with a pungent, incredibly strong, garlic-infused, thick, heavy fat. Massaging completely crushed raw garlic cloves deeply, totally, mixed in warm, heavily rendered goose fat extracts the powerful, incredibly highly anti-inflammatory sulfur deep directly into the terribly painful hip. Rubbing this totally strange, warm, heavily greasy paste daily, completely, significantly, totally reduces the severe, massive swelling pressing directly, deeply against the delicate, highly inflamed, aging sciatic nerve. It absolutely, totally sounds completely crazy to entirely modern, heavily young ears, but it beautifully, completely gave crippled, totally suffering seniors their vital, highly independent walking legs magically, fully back. The thick, incredibly heavy animal fat completely, entirely hides the terrible, highly harsh, completely burning bite of the garlic, making it surprisingly, incredibly, wonderfully easy to completely, daily apply. This one totally single, complete, two-ingredient historic recipe successfully kept countless, proud, completely, deeply stubborn grandfathers entirely, completely out of terrible, deeply depressing, highly expensive, dark, isolated nursing homes.